Hi everyone, my name is Kennedy. I'm a bit nervous to share my story, but I'm also excited to tell it. To be honest, I don't usually like talking about myself or sharing personal information with others. It's hard to explain, but I often feel uncomfortable around people, even if they're friendly. Have you ever felt like that? It's not that I have a cold heart. It's just a feeling that I have to deal with every day. Let me tell you a bit about how I got here. My parents were like most people, they wanted to start a family and share their love with a child. Growing up, I was the youngest in my family and was often spoiled by my parents. I can look back at old photos and see that they gave me everything I ever asked for. However, all of these material things were not enough. They never took the time to get to know my personality or interests. Things were peaceful until I started first grade. Since my mom stayed at home, I never went to kindergarten, and as a result, I didn't socialize with other kids. Starting school was a nightmare for me because I suddenly had to deal with so many new people. Every single child was screaming and being hyperactive, and I had to listen to it all. I was completely shell-shocked. To add to the distress, an older kid approached me, tried to hold my hand, and smelled terrible with dirty hands. I got scared, pushed him away, and began crying hysterically. I made such a scene. Shortly after, my mom arrived to pick me up and took me home. On the way back, I was shaking uncontrollably. I was traumatized. I thought to myself that school was the last place I ever wanted to go back to. My mother didn't quite understand what was happening. She was so confused. You might think I was being overly dramatic, but the truth is I really hated being there. After the incident, things took a turn for the worse. My strange behavior began to worry my mother, especially when the school counselor called to inform her that if I continued to struggle with socializing with my peers, the school would need to investigate whether my behavior was a result of an unhealthy home environment. Their suspicions even extended to concerns about potential physical abuse I might have been enduring. This placed my dear parents in an exceedingly uncomfortable predicament, one where it seemed as if they were mistreating me. They began to shoulder the blame for my social awkwardness and my struggle to engage with others. It was an immensely trying period. My parents had been nothing but loving and supportive in raising me, and they were genuinely at a loss as to why I exhibited such peculiar behavior. Then, one peaceful evening while we were sharing dinner, an abrupt, incessant knocking at the door shattered the tranquility. The noise was deafening, and I recall crouching behind the couch, covering my ears with my trembling hands. When my dad opened the door, a police officer entered and explained that my school's counseling committee had requested a surprise checkup to ensure my well-being. However, when the officer laid eyes on me, it was clear that I was far from okay. My appearance, huddled behind the couch in fear, would have raised alarm in anyone who saw me. That fateful night, my parents were arrested and compelled to spend the night in custody while I was escorted to a small room and interviewed by Child Services. They posed numerous questions and I, being extremely uncooperative, made the process difficult. Hours turned into days and gradually, it became apparent that the issue wasn't about my parents. Rather, I was simply a peculiar child who was overwhelmed by fear of almost everything. After that incident, people started talking. Rumors were going around about my parents, but most of the gossip was about how strange and peculiar I was, the child who caused her parents to spend a night in prison. Unfortunately, I have always had a hard time accepting myself for who I am, ever since I was a little child. Being weird and awkwardly quiet never seemed to go away as I got older. In fact, with time, that became my sole identity, the weirdo quiet girl. I even used to believe that I was a bad person. If I was a good, decent person, then why hadn't I just let the social workers know that my parents had done nothing wrong? It felt like the whole world was against me, and it continued this way until I became a teenager. I struggled endlessly to express myself, engage with others, or even participate in the most basic social interactions. Awkwardness seemed to define my every moment. Picture feeling like there was no refuge when sadness overwhelmed you, no sanctuary to shield you from the harshness of the world. I felt utterly disconnected, as if I didn't belong anywhere. It felt as though there was no niche for me in this vast world, and these bleak thoughts haunted me relentlessly, an inescapable presence. However, one day, a glimmer of solace emerged. I discovered drawing, a creative outlet that allowed me to release some of the pent-up negativity that had consumed me. Immersing myself in art became a profound source of relief and healing. I remember how much I enjoyed making art, and even my mom noticed it too. She encouraged me to continue, and as time went on, life became less harsh. Things got better, and my artwork was appreciated by many people, including my art teacher, who expressed great admiration for my work. I finally felt like I belonged and like I had found a way to express myself. My paintings and drawings began to attract more attention, and my school even displayed them in their art gallery. The more people appreciated my work, the more I felt like I fit in, and I couldn't stop creating. I dedicated every waking moment to painting, with some nights passing by without a wink of sleep as I immersed myself in my art. A local gallery in our town approached me with an offer to host an exhibition, and I eagerly accepted. However, I failed to realize the mistake I was making. I spent weeks in relentless preparation, isolating myself and painting ceaselessly. On the day of the exhibition, my mom accompanied me to the gallery for setup. As people began to arrive, a wave of panic swept over me, leading to my first ever panic attack. The subsequent events remain hazy in my memory, but I know I lost consciousness, and my parents had to escort me home. The exhibition I had invested so much time and effort into ultimately went to waste. I wasn't even present for the exhibition's opening. My parents grew deeply concerned. The doctor got in touch with my school and arranged for me to take some time off, citing a severe burnout that required rest and recovery. Over the next month, I spent all my days in bed, devoid of any artistic pursuits, opting instead to browse the internet and sleep. One fateful day, I decided to research my symptoms, and what I discovered was nothing short of astonishing. I couldn't understand why I hadn't done this earlier. It all made sense. According to my findings, I had autism. The revelation devastated me. I had always sensed that something was amiss, but I had never fathomed that it could be autism. For the following few weeks, I remained confined to my darkened bedroom, engulfed by a profound sense of misery. Soon enough, I lost my appetite altogether. I had no desire to engage in anything, and life seemed utterly devoid of hope. I grew so feeble that even a short walk to the bathroom at the end of the hall felt like an insurmountable challenge. Then, one day, my mom insisted on taking me for a walk in the garden to breathe in some fresh air. On the way downstairs, I collapsed. Panicked, my mom rushed me to the hospital, where a battery of tests was conducted. They decided to keep me overnight for health monitoring. During my stay, a particularly compassionate nurse attended to me, and I found myself opening up to her. I confided in her about my autism, and her reaction was one of genuine surprise. She hurried off to fetch a doctor. They approached me, assuring me that I did not have autism. They explained that, aside from a weakened immune system due to malnutrition, I was in good health. Their decision to keep me in the hospital for a few nights was solely to monitor my eating habits. My reaction was immediate. I started crying. I had spent my entire life feeling like an outsider, and finally, I thought I had found an explanation in autism. Now, this doctor was telling me I was perfectly healthy, leaving me feeling utterly bewildered, and as if I had regressed to being the awkward, peculiar girl I used to be. The doctors left me to collect my thoughts for the night, and then I heard a voice from behind the curtain. There stood a girl around my age, asking if she could enter. Although I felt vulnerable and shy, I still said yes for some reason. She sat down next to my bed and introduced herself as Lily. She explained that she was also here because she had stopped eating and her parents were worried about her. As I listened to her talk, something inside me shifted, and I felt like I could finally communicate with someone. I started talking to her about my art and how I felt awkward around people. She said she felt exactly the same way. Soon, we realized how much we had in common, and I went to sleep that night smiling. Finally, I had a friend who understood me, and it was the best feeling in the world. The more I got to know Julian, the more I felt like I belonged. It's amazing how meeting Chloe made me feel less weird and more accepted. For years, I've felt like an outcast just because I'm not the most sociable person out there. But being different doesn't make me any less of a person. I've come to realize that we can't all be outgoing and bubbly, and that's okay. I only wish I had met Chloe earlier in life, but sometimes we need to grow on our own. Better late than never, right? Here's to the power of friendship.